Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is D back again with another movie review. And this time we're going back to the Nicolas Cage catalog, and we are going to be talking about 1997's Con Air. Now, Con Air, I know is produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, but I never really noticed who directed this. Now, the natural inclination is to maybe think Michael Bay, because at one point, Michael Bay and Bruckheimer were kind of attached at the hip. But I noticed while I was watching the movie, there were a lot of kind of Michael Bay-isms that were actually missing from this movie. A lot of kind of shots that are usually in every single Michael Bay movie you would see. There were some of those that were missing from this movie, but there's a lot of Jerry Bruckheimer kind of things that you see all over just the movie. A lot of the music, just a lot of it, you could tell Bruckheimer's fingerprints were all over this film. Not so much anything that made me think Michael Bay had anything to do with this. So when I edit this all together, I will put up the name of the director who directed the film, because I just have a hunch it actually wasn't Michael Bay that directed this, just going by some of the things that actually weren't in this movie. But anyway, so just the plot about this movie. Nicolas Cage plays Cameron Poe, who is an Army Ranger returning from a tour of duty, and he's returning just in his military garb, with all his kind of his patches and achievements and everything. And he's visiting his girl who's working at a bar, and he basically ends up getting in an altercation with a couple of guys who just, basically seem like they're kind of jealous, kind of hating a little bit. And he ends up killing one of them and has to serve time. I think he serves about 8 years. And at the time that this all happens, when he was visiting his girl, she had kind of, she was pregnant at the time. I don't know if she just revealed it at that time or if he had already knew when he returned, but she's pregnant when he ends up going to jail. But the daughter, of course, is born while he's in there. And when his release date comes, it happens to be the same date as his daughter's birthday, who he still has yet to meet in person. So he's excited to go home and meet his daughter that he's never met, and of course just get back to his wife and his life. And he's going to be on a plane transporting convicts. And basically this plane is transporting, besides Cameron Poe, who is, obviously for the purposes of this movie and just, general common sense, is a good guy. And he has a friend there with him. I can't think of who the friend's name, but he has a friend who also, obviously for the purposes of the story, the general idea is that his friend seems to be a pretty decent guy as well. Just kind of typical movie, Hollywood movie characterizations and whatnot. They kind of lay out for you who are the decent inmates and who are the true monsters and whatnot. And the majority of the inmates on this flight are pretty much monsters, for the most part. At the very least, they are true villains. John Malkovich plays Cyrus the Virus, who is the head kind of inmate in charge when all hell breaks loose. And by all hell breaking loose, I basically mean the inmates take over the plane. So the inmates get control of the plane, and Cameron Poe is going to try to take it upon himself to save the day. He has a friend that's on the plane with him, as well as there is a lady guard who he does kind of want to protect to a certain degree in this situation. And so he's going to try to save the day. And John Cusack plays a man of the law down on the ground who is trying to, he's basically kind of, the plane is kind of his, in a way. He works with the U.S. Marshal's office, and so he does have a high degree of interest in how this whole situation plays out. And he essentially ends up kind of working with Nicolas Cage to solve this situation. And that's all very kind of simplified way of talking about things. There are a little, more details within the film. Things happen in terms of people's positions and relations to others, and twists and turns and all that type of typical movie stuff. So what I thought about this movie, I just did a review for Face Off, and this is, kind of that third film or second film. I'm not quite sure what which was released first, but Con Air is the third or second film in that Nicolas Cage kind of action trilogy with Face Off and Con Air and The Rock. So it was good to really watch this in totality again. I had seen it once before, but it was a long time ago to where I really needed to rewatch it again to kind of remember some of the things that happened, like some of the details and whatnot. It's a good watch. It's a fun watch. I think out of those three Nicolas Cage action movies, Con Air might be the worst by a hair. It's not. Con Air might be the worst. It's not. That doesn't make it bad, but out of those three films, it would be third for me. I do think that kind of the setup of it is an interesting setup. It is kind of unique. It is different. I think especially when you watch it now, the kind of concept of it and even some of the execution of it does stand out. You know, you do kind of wonder, would they even make a movie like that now? Yeah, I mean, there are things in this movie where I could see them not making the same type of movie now, which a lot of movies in the 90s are just products of the 90s, and they are films where just they're gonna exist within their time. You won't see certain types of movies being made anymore, at least not on a big stage Hollywood type level. So it's interesting, some of the things that are in this film. Nicolas Cage, he does great in this, actually, in terms of what he's supposed to do. I actually appreciate his performance and his character in this film more so now than I even did way back, when these movies were first coming out. I remember when Con Air was first kind of making the rounds, I thought Cage kind of looked a little goofy in the role, because that was actually my first time ever seeing him with hair like that kind of long hair. The accent felt goofy at the time, and but all of that with so much time having passed, and Nicolas Cage since Con Air has done so many way more just kind of outlandish roles, that when I now returning to Con Air to watch it, it doesn't seem as that crazy of a get up for him. Like the long hair look doesn't seem as crazy as it seemed back then. Like it seemed not necessarily crazy back then, but just awkward, kind of like when you see somebody. It was a similar kind of vibe to when when I first saw Tom Cruise in Collateral, and he had that white hair where it almost looked like a wig. It was so just different looking from what you were used to seeing from Tom Cruise, that the hair almost looked like a wig, you know what I mean? And there was something low-key goofy about it. Now the movie's so good that you get over that. I got over that, but it was still there for me. It was a similar thing with Con Air when I first saw Nicolas Cage's look in it, where just the hair just kind of almost, it didn't even seem like it was his hair really. It was just so kind of unusual for him. But with time passing, it works better. The hair doesn't come off as goofy as it did back then. Even the accent doesn't come off as goofy as it came off back then. I think he's done so many wild and just varied roles within the last 10 years or so, where he's always worked nonstop, but with the last 10 years or so, 10, maybe even 15 years or so, he's just really worked nonstop. He's been in a lot of stuff with a lot of variety in terms of what's going on within those movies. So returning to something like Con Air is relatively low key Nicolas Cage performance, all things considered. He's obviously in good shape in this movie. He looks like action, movie ready from a physical perspective. So that's always great when your protagonist in an action film is believable doing the things that they're doing. Just from an aesthetic perspective, it's easy to buy into him doing the physical things that he's doing in this movie. And that's something that he actually, the action movies that he's been in, that's one thing that he's been good at is it's been believable. You've been able to buy into what he's doing, kind of in the same way. Now, I'm not necessarily saying on the same level or not, but kind of in the same way that Keanu Reeves, you're able to really, for whatever reason, buy into him doing what he does when he's in Speed, or when he's in The Matrix, or when he's in John Wick. You're able to kind of buy into the performer. Nicolas Cage actually has a lot of that in action movies. I think I'm gonna kind of cut the review short here. I don't know if this is a movie that really warrants a whole lot of, there's not a lot of deep dive type stuff to go on here. I will talk about some of the inmates, the kind of villain inmates in this movie. John Malkovich, I talked about him playing Cyrus the Virus, who is pretty much the ringleader of the situation. Then you have Ving Rhames, who plays Diamond Dog, who is pretty much like next in command after Cyrus the Virus. Danny Trejo is in this, and he plays Johnny 23, who is just a he's not very nice to the ladies. I guess I'll put it like that. So, and it's an interesting thing because this is one of the first, I think this might be the first role that I really remember seeing Danny Trejo in. And it's kind of the role that, in terms of character, it might be the most kind of despicable character that I've seen him play. In all the other films that I haven't seen anywhere near to all of Danny Trejo's films, but in all the other films that I've seen him in, there was an element where you were able to kind of like the character to some degree, even if it was just for entertainment purposes, even if he was playing a villain. This character he plays in Con Air, there's really no redeeming qualities about this character. He's not funny. He's not, there's nothing impressive in terms of physical feats or anything like that, or clever. Nothing. There's literally nothing redeeming about his character in this movie. He's just a character that you're glad when he finally gets what's essentially coming to him. So that was my introduction to Danny Trejo, but he's in this. And also a big thing I want to point out, Dave Chappelle is in this, and I had no idea he was in this, or I forgot he was in it. And he's in it like quite a bit. He's in the movie enough, because there's a few movies that he's kind of made very brief appearances in where he's like in the movie, but it's almost like, he's in like a scene or two. He's not really in the movie. In Con Air, he's actually in the movie. He has a big enough role to where it's like, yeah, he can, you can tell people, hey, Dave Chappelle is in Con Air. He doesn't just make an appearance. He's actually in it for a good, considerably lengthy stretch of the film, all things considered. I mean, considering I forgot he was in this movie at all, and I don't hear people talk about the fact that he's in Con Air a lot. When people talk about Dave Chappelle, they talk in his movies, they'll talk about Half Baked, they might talk about Blue Streak, they'll talk about his brief appearance on stage in The Nutty Professor. They'll talk about certain things, but I never hear them talk about him being in Con Air, and he's in it quite a bit. So it was an interesting discovery for me, So there is that, and I guess I'll leave it there. There's not much more to say than that. When it comes to the 3 Nicolas Cage action movies of the mid '90s, I think my ranking would go probably Face Off first, then The Rock, then Con Air. At one point, it went the other way around, where The Rock was number 1. I thought there was a period in time where just The Rock was just a film that I just watched over and over again. I thought that was just the greatest action movie, for a good while. I was just really into that. Michael Bay's directing style as a youngster, his directing style really kind of hypnotized me in a way, and all that type of stuff. Just good, popcorn action. But for now, I probably will go Face Off, The Rock, and then Con Air. I recommend Con Air if you're a fan of action movies. Of course, if you're a fan of Nicolas Cage action movies, if you've seen The Rock and Face Off but haven't seen Con Air, definitely check out Con Air, because it's going to kind of complete the trifecta of those mid-90s Nicolas Cage action films. It's worth a watch for sure. If you're a fan of, something like Die Hard, obviously there's differences, not saying this is anywhere as good as Die Hard or anything like that, but if you're a fan of these, movies where clearly relatively noble, good characters are in situations where they have to save the day. So you're talking about things like Die Hard, talking about things like Sudden Death with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Even if you want to, I can't really remember all the details of Under Siege, but, maybe you could say something like Under Siege, but just all of those just kind of general action, big time action films. You can think of a long list of them yourself. So that is that. I will leave the review there. As always, thank you for watching. Links down in the description for some of the kind of just the kind of different things that I have on the store website, mkd58mediastore.com. Just t-shirts and things like that, sweaters, hoodies, and more stuff will be added to that. So, always kind of be on the lookout, possibly check that stuff out. That would be greatly appreciated. But in the end, just thank you for checking out some of these videos. And as always, I will catch you on the next go round.